Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of vBrownBag. I am very excited tonight. We have a friend of the show, an AWS hero. His name is Mike Fiedler, and we had a wonderful conversation at PyCon. And hold on. Let's get into some show notes first. How to give back to open source without losing your mind with our special guest, Mike. If you want to get in on the conversation, if you at vBrownBag, I will be paying attention on Twitter. If you are in the studio audience and you've got some questions, I will be fielding the questions to our AWS hero this evening. And if you want to follow him, I highly encourage that you do. He is Mike Fiedler on Twitter. And if you are on Blue Sky, he is also Mike the Man over there. I am Mistwire, no matter where you might try to look for me. Blogs, Blue Sky, Twitter. I'm Mistwire, but everywhere. Mike, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing all right, Chris. Sadly, when I signed up for Twitter, so many moons ago, somebody else already had Mike the Man. And that's been...
But you have the domain name.
I have the domain name. I have all of the domain names. But it's almost been my policy now going forward that if there's a site that I can't get my handle on, then I'm not going to use it.
Yeah, just in absentia. Where's Mike the Man?
I don't know.
Awesome. Okay, well, as we're chatting, I'm going to relinquish power so that you don't start peppering my screen with hearts again, and I'll let you fire it up, and we shall talk about how this came to be. You and I were sitting around at PyCon, having a shenanigan, as we do, and you deigned to sit down. You became a PiPi maintainer a little while ago.
PiPi.
Is okay. This is part of my ignorance. People say there is a distinction between PyPI and PiPi.
Absolutely. So we're going down a tangent here, and we'll get back to the story
as we
do, right? So there is a very popular service called the PyPI.org. This is the Python Package Index, PyPI. And this is where pretty much all the open source packages that you're, pip install, poetry install, pipenv install, hatch install, right, whatever you're installing, right, is often going to that index at pypi.org first. So that's what that is. It is also colloquially known internally as the warehouse because it's where you store all your packages.
Right.
And the project, which you would pronounce PyPi, is spelled PyPy.
Aha.
Which is an entirely different thing.
Gotcha. I appreciate the edification. So you said that you were a PyPI maintainer, and I said, "Ooh, what's that?" And you said, "Come, young Padawan, let me sit you down and walk you through a couple of bug fixes." And I was literally a kid in a candy store. I enjoyed watching you go through the process. Since then, I actually took a course on Git and GitHub so I could get really good with the things and retroactively started connecting a lot of dots from our conversation. So I'm really jazzed about what we're going to do tonight. And what snippets of wisdom are you ready to impart, Mr. Fiedler, the code gardener?
Yeah. So I've taken on the self-titled title of code gardener because I've started to give you a kind of just kind of brief history. I started learning basic software programming in 1980, 1981 with literally a language called BASIC, BASIC. And it's been a fair amount of years since then, and professionally I've been doing this for about 30 years. And I came into this realm having started with just basic programming through gaming and like building hardware to get a better gaming rig and like play better games. And then eventually got into systems building and operations and the evolutions of networks and then internets, and kind of connecting those dots. So I came up through that kind of perspective of, Windows administration, Linux administration, building these larger systems and figuring out how they work. And over the course of that tenure, you start looking at, okay, well, I can kind of crack the nut on what is going on because I understand how the computer works, but I haven't fully kind of embraced this notion of writing code or developing software, because that seems hard, right? And back then in the mid to late 80s, early 90s, it was a lot harder than it is today. One might argue that the things you needed to know were fewer, right? Because there were less choices. Fewer choices, you didn't have to worry about which language you would pick. But Python is now about 30 years old, right? And it's been around for a while, and it's matured and it's gotten better. And as I progressed throughout my career of learning more about systems administration, and how to effectively automate more and more things, I got deeper into, all right, how do I do VB scripts? How do I do PowerShell scripts? How do I take a first pass at a bash script, Perl, Python, Ruby, and just delving into each layers of these in order not just to tinker around, but in order to do my job better, right? And it's been kind of a theme on my memoirs of to constantly be learning, because if you're not learning, you're not kind of scratching that itch of, I want to learn more. I want to understand how things work. And that's kind of how I got into like software, right? It started out from, I'm just trying to do this thing. And it's, oh, well, if I open up a hex editor and open up the binary file and change these two values in the binary file, with that hex editor, I can make my game go faster, and like do these hacks, if you will, in order to get the outcome that I was looking for. So learning how to, run large scale systems migrations and how to like reboot a firewall without it having you lock yourself out, right? It required a certain degree of, all right, I understand what I'm trying to do. How do I actually go out and do that? So it's how do I take these pieces that I know I want to do and kind of break down the problem into smaller parts? Well, this firewall speaks TCL. Let me learn TCL a little bit, enough to kind of be dangerous enough to read a TCL program. All right, now how do I write a cron job that will reboot? All right, well, now we've learned some more cron syntax. So it's all a little bit about like, I have an idea of where I want to go, and it's how do I break it down? And that's what software development, systems engineering, you name it. It's taking bigger problems and breaking them down into smaller components and then solving each of those components to get to the bigger thing. So that's all it is. I've demystified all the magic that there is in this industry to just break things down into smaller bits and then solve for those bits. And then eventually you'll have solved the entire puzzle.
Easy. All right. I'll make my AAA game tomorrow. I'm going to sit down and get it done.
Yeah. So, when we talked about, what should we do? What should we talk about? What are people going to be interested in around open source? Specifically from me, I think it was important to, all right, well, what does that mean? Let's talk about what open source is, right? And open source is this term that I'm going to poorly define because it's poorly defined. I'm sure Wikipedia has an article on it, but the notion of that if I wanted to, I could see what is going on, right? When you buy a general car off the lot, right? You can pop the hood and go in the engine and go through all the different components that are in the car, all the mechanical ones at least, and dig through and understand what they do. You don't have to in order to just get in your car and drive, right? You can just do the thing you want to do, but you have the ability to pop the hood and see what's under the cover, under the hood, and what's in there. And with open source software, the source of the software, you might only want to, execute or run the software, right? You might want to run a web server or a desktop application like Zoom. Zoom is not open source software. Zoom is a company builds it and compiles it from source and gives you a closed source solution, which works just fine for us. But it means that if I ever want to fix a bug or add a feature, I can't do that unless I work for Zoom.
Right.
So open source means that I can see the source. It doesn't mean that I can contribute to it. It doesn't mean that they want my code. It just means that I can see what are the base level components that make up this software. Now, a very common approach is that if I have some software that I found useful, that I've written, that I open source, that I give that to the world in some fashion. I might license it. I might say, this is a very permissive license where if you use this, you are more than welcome to use it for commercial or non-commercial use. You're welcome to modify it as long as you include the license agreement. There's a ton of different licensing complexities when it comes to software. I don't think we should really, dig into that level. Neither of us are lawyers. But suffice to say that if you ever are looking at creating some open source software, there's a very helpful site that I've found very useful for myself called choosealicense.com. And it walks you through some of like the main kinds of software licensing and helps you kind of pick which one you want to use. There's a very good one called a very good one. It's not that good. It's the WTF PL. It's the WTF public license. Do WTF you want with it. Very simple, very permissive.
I did not know about choose a license. I'm going to mark that down. Nice.
Yeah. And for the other folks that want a deeper definition of open source software, there's the open source initiative at opensource.org, which I'll give you a link here if you want to share that. And there's another resource that also kind of delves into a lot of the open source things. This one is maintained by Red Hat as kind of a gift to the community, which is very nice.
Nice. Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So just to kind of nail the definition a little bit on open source, most of what we do today is built on some sort of open source software. It is very rare today that you're going to use an app, a project, a website that hasn't used some part of an open source technology. For example, if you're using, if you're coding your website and you're using a web server like Nginx or Apache, HTTPD, those are open source technologies. If you are using a web coding framework like React or Vue, those are open source frameworks that you can use, benefit for free. The organizations give those away for free for you to use. But will also accept contributions, just like PyPI.org, Python, the core C Python language will accept contributions. The Ruby language, I've got a commit in there that from a few years ago. PostgreSQL, like all these projects that you kind of lean on and use, most of them are open source.
Yeah, it's a fascinating licensing paradigm, and the folks in the open source community, by their nature, they are giving humans. It's something that, you and I go to a lot of different conferences, and you and I talk to a lot of different people, and PyCon, by and large, is like my favorite conference for meeting folks that are just kind of like in that same brain space. It's very open source oriented, and that kind of reflects in their personalities too. They're just giving people. So it's super fun to start learning more about that and how we can contribute. And you and I had this conversation. We were talking about me saying, well, I'm a baby Python programmer. I've only been doing it for a couple of years. I'm a sysadmin from days of yore. What could I possibly do? And you're like, oh, no, come here. Let me show you all of the areas in which you could help. Do you know how to string a sentence together? Then you can help write documentation, because documentation is horrible here. And so yeah, no, I am enthusiastic to share this with our community. And get them as enthused as I was during PyCon for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me share a popular XKCD, because that's always a good demonstration, right? This is XKCD 2347. We'll drop a link to it in the notes. But this is kind of very tongue-in-cheek diagram where all modern digital infrastructure is all these different towers and things, and there's this one little project that some random person in Nebraska has been maintaining since 2003. And like, this is a little tongue-in-cheek, but it's kind of true.
Yeah, there's a lot, and that actually leads into supply chain vulnerabilities and ways that we have to actually protect ourselves in the open source community.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
if that person gets compromised, then a large swath of the internet might get screwed.
Yep. And it's happened, right? There are some examples in modern parlance, such as the left pad incident from a few years ago, where a very popular library that was included in countless other packages got, yanked from the internet, and that's it. The author deleted it. And because a lot of folks didn't have some, package mitigation strategies in place, their applications couldn't build, they couldn't run their deploy. So, we could get into a whole episode on supply chain and dealing with that. But I just wanted to share that one as a cool moment of Zen that I should always kind of take a look at. But when we do talk about open source, and you mentioned, okay, I'm a newbie at this, right? So a really good platform that has launched an enormous amount of open source contribution is GitHub, github.com. Prior to GitHub, there were other platforms for social coding between SourceForge, Launchpad, and some others of that era. And some of them are still around. They're just not nearly as popular. And GitHub made software contributions a lot easier and a lot more popular. Folks will have GitLab or Bitbucket servers, and it's all a matter of how easy do you want it to make contribution to other folks. I'm gonna pull up one of my first GitHub issues, and this will be a fun for me. I don't know if it's fun for you, Chris, but this is back in January 2012, so over a decade ago. This is one of my first issues for a HashiCorp repo. It wasn't under the HashiCorp name back then.
Right.
It was under the author of Vagrant, and I had, was running, very early Vagrant software, and I tried to run and I got this error message, and it said a translation is missing. I provided some context, gave another reference, and within a day, that day, I think, Mitchell fixed it, right? And, he fixed it, he referenced it, that's the issue. I put it in the wrong place, and now it's in the right place. All it needed was somebody to say, this is a problem, and, no problem, I got it. I since went on to contribute to Vagrant a number of times. This was a lot of changes, over 500. And the reason I'm showing this one is because I didn't know what I was doing. I pulled in a whole bunch of different commits here. I was merging, I was reverting. I didn't know what I was doing, right? This was, I was early to GitHub. And sure enough, Mitchell's like, I'd like to merge this, but it's pretty dirty. You can see this, maybe pull out a patch, try and reapply. And I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So I ended up closing this one and opened a different one, which was just one commit, fewer changes, right? And then he merged it in this change set over here, right? So, this was a successful example of me not really knowing what I was doing, trying to do something, getting some positive feedback from the maintainers saying, the thing that you're trying to do is a good idea, but I'm not really sure if you've done it right. Do you want to try another way? So the fact that there's some engagement and going back and forth to say, you know what, I think, this is a good idea, and like figuring that out was pretty much, I want to do a thing, right? I wanted to enable Red Hat and CentOS style bridging and host-only networking, which I don't even remember what this was. This was over a decade ago, but I needed it. For some reason, I needed it. And I was willing to take the time to read the existing code. Like, I knew all the pseudo commands I was trying to run for networking and do all the stuff. I just needed to learn how to write Ruby and in the Vagrant parlance and kind of move code around and do that. So it just took some time. Now, I showed you those to kind of get into like, all right, well, not everybody is writing Vagrant or using Vagrant, but how do I get started, right? So the easiest way today on GitHub is probably to use the label good first issue. This is something that a lot of folks will tag issues in their repo. So if you want to look at Shopify's Tapioca, I'll open this in the next tab. So default to raising if Rails could not be loaded. So they report, we swallow this error log over here. This is incorrect. And they put an enhancement in good for first issue. It's like they've identified exactly what it is, where it is, what they should be doing, but didn't actually make the change. So this is where like filing an issue is a very important part of the open source contribution process. Even if you're not going to contribute to code, if you found an error, if you hit an unexpected condition, creating an issue for the maintainers, I think is a good first way to get in and create, help out so we can filter. By the way, if you see difference, I have bugs broken out from issues. I'm using an extension called Refined GitHub, which you might want to take a look at. I know that some people just see different things and they're like, that's different. So Refined GitHub is a browser extension that just improves my GitHub experience.
Nice. I'll grab all of these links and put them into the show notes so that people watching this in the future will be able to chase them down as well.
Sounds good. So speaking around good first issues, right? So they only have one. So do I have to go and like look for every I could look for owners, I could look for open. There's 15,000 of these. So somebody out there wrote a goodfirstissue.dev website.
Oh, nice.
Which will curate these from open source projects and help make your, find what you want to do. And you can break it down by, I'm a Python dev.
Oh, very cool.
So, all right, well, what is Python package multivariate hypothesis testing. There's 3 good issues there. I don't know what that is. Matplot plotting with Python, 10 issues. A single, simple arbitrary. So this is where like selecting a good first issue should map to what your interests are and what you already know. So if you're into, scientific plotting or multivariate hypothesis testing, so I actually am interested in this, right?
Are you really?
I am.
What is that? What is multivariate hypothesis testing?
So multivariate hypothesis testing seems like it would be helpful for, let's see. Welcome to all contributions. Yay, look at that. What is it? So let's open their docs and say, with the increased amount of data in many fields, hypothesis testing for highly dimensional and nonlinear data is important. So hypothesis testing is a whole class of testing where instead of providing inputs and expected outputs, you provide a hypothesis of, I believe that this function should accept a string, and then hypothesis testing will generate tons of different strings as inputs. So that way, if it fails, you can see, oh, it fails on strings that are over 128 characters or something like that. So that way you don't have to write all of your test cases forever. It's a little bit of a niche hypothesis Python. So hypothesis helps you do this, and Hippo is going to do multivariate complex for testing. So that's what that is. But as a good first issue, I can scroll through and say, you know what? Git Cola, the highly caffeinated Git GUI. They have 6 issues. What is that? I don't know. It's a Git GUI. Let's take a look at their screenshot. So, all right. Well, if I wanted a Git user interface and I wanted to contribute, and I know a lot about Git, or I know a little bit about user interfaces, maybe this is the one that I want to contribute to. So when it comes to kind of selecting, it's easy to kind of
go with your gut.
Use this and filter through and say, you know what, I'd rather do something in, I don't know, let's say shell, right? So the Creative Commons project, I guess this is their website, have some issues that is like, all right, well, manage the technical implementation. The website is pre-release. Here, see this. And, you can open up their issues and find the good first issues by just clicking on these labels, right? So this is, they've very much labeled it very well with little emojis, critical. We agreed to use Gutenberg. Now we need to test how it works. Here's what to do, and then go and figure that out. So finding issues is pretty easy, both with the default label, but maybe you don't want to do a contribution. Maybe you want to do something else. There's a fun site that I've used called Code Triage. So this one says, pick your favorite repos and get a different open issue in your inbox every day. Fix the issue and everyone wins. So I signed up with GitHub a while back. Probably need to reauthorize because it's been a while. And I subscribed to one repository called Crystal. It's a programming language. And I said, I want to get 1 issue per day. I could do more, less. I could do docs. But you can also look for other repos in any language that you like.
Oh, nice.
So let's find our favorite language. CPython has over 8,000 issues that need triaging. Odoo has over 5,000, YouTube DL, etc. So if I were to get this, I could say I'd like to triage here. And what does that mean to triage, right? So help out, fix these things, unhandled this. They haven't set up docs yet, but basically it's, all right, this is an old issue or a new issue that needs some triage help, right? It's unsolved. And you could read through and say, all right, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm not going to do. So, every repository, this folks opt into this. So repositories can advertise themselves here. But let's see, Sentry has 11,000, right? And they've got an issue. So you would get an issue in your email inbox, usually not the most recent ones, right? And usually more aged ones, and say, well, these came up, right? Well, all right. So you could say, you know what, if this is aged, right, and they want to remove them, you could go into the code and say, I'm going to delete the page that renders this, and then that little checkbox, they'll check that, right? So there's a couple different ways to get ideas for what to work on and how to kind of find something, right? Some of the first projects I've ever kind of contributed to have mostly been typos or typo fixes, right? Like there's a typo here, it's misspelled, I will contribute it to you, you're welcome, and then I can move on with my life, right? Because every little bit helps. And I think that's the one commit that I have in Ruby core is I fixed a typo. And it's like, no contribution is too small. It all depends on what the project wants. So let's take a look at our Hippo project here again. Something to look for in a repository is a contributing file. So very good projects will tell you, here's how to do this, right? They advertise, here's how to contribute to us, what we would like you to do, how to create an actionable bug report. Show me a reproducible snippet, right? Tell me what tests are involved, provide a traceback, contributing code, fork, here's how to do it. Here's check out your feature branch, git add your files, git commit, push orange, pull request. So this is a very extensive contributing.md, but what that means is that the authors and maintainers have put this here for you so that way you know what to expect. They've set the expectation so that way you can say, all right, if I follow these steps, it still might not get accepted, but at least I followed these steps, right? So they don't kick it back and say, oh, you forgot to run the formatter on your code. Oh, you forgot to run the tests, So they've got some guidelines, they've got some other information here to kind of help you get the right contribution. And very often you can see the statistics on a repository to see how many things were closed, right? If you hit a repository and it has 1,000 open pull requests, that's not a bad sign. It just means they haven't gotten to 1,000 pull requests. If they have 1,000 pull requests and no closed or merged ones, then that might be a signal, right?
Yeah.
Whereas this one has 4 open and 214 closed, right? And you can see what somebody else did is I referred to this issue. It's a type of change its bug. What does it do? And then you can see the change is not a whole lot. They added some noise. I don't know what any of this means, but the contribution was small. It fixed a thing.
That's a good thing that I didn't even think about. Like you as you're evaluating the repo, you have to make sure that they're still doing something with it, and you're not wasting your time by submitting a pull request that they're not even ever going to get to.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's a good bet that folks who have like opted in or have started labeling good first issue, that those are going to be a little bit more welcoming than others.
Yeah.
Same thing with code triage, right? These are opt-in systems. Well, I don't know if good first issue. Good first issue is an opt-in if you use the good first issue label on issues.
Right.
So that's how you will be found. I do want to highlight two other programs that are somewhat seasonal that are really good for open source. One is called Hacktoberfest, which is once a year. Hacktoberfest opens for the month of October. This past year was presented by DigitalOcean, AppWrite, and Docker. It's a fun program to just be like, all right, well, go out and find some stuff, contribute to open source, and they've got some recaps on what it was like, how many contributions happened. They got some good stats there. I'm not going to watch the video right now, but it's a fun program, right? Participation is open to anybody. Everyone is welcome. Quality is fun. Quality is key. But like hundreds, thousands of folks all over the world are doing this every year for the month of October.
And you can get a T-shirt out of it. Or
sometimes.
At least you could back in 2018. I got one in 2018 for basically fixing people's documentation.
Yeah. and that's valuable, right? They also Hacktoberfest has a bunch of links on how to do things, right? And start participating. They'll link to some of the same stuff. Oh, upforgrabs.net. Hadn't heard of that one, right? And then Awesome for Beginners. So go find yourself some awesome for beginners. Very similar to like Good First Issue, right? So all of these are just resources to find stuff. And then Hacktoberfest will go one step deeper to like give you some more GitHub training, understanding the GitHub flow, which are all just links out to other places, but it's all really good content to kind of help you do the thing. Another seasonal one is 24pullrequest.com. So I've given you something for October and something for December.
24pullrequest.com.
Yeah. So
nice.
It's the season. It's kind of like an advent calendar or other kind of seasonal things where it's encouraging you to create at least one pull request a day. So that way, you can focus on giving back because ultimately, right, like as I mentioned at the very top, we all use open source in some way. This browser that I'm using, which is Google Chrome, is built on the Chromium open source project, right? These websites that 24pull request itself, sorry, that's Gitter, that's their chat. They are over on GitHub as well. So this website is on GitHub and it's open source and it's using, what is it? Ruby, HTML, SAS, JavaScript, CoffeeScript, all open source technologies. So like, it's all kind of turtles all the way down. Open source leads to more open source, which leads to more open source.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
Get all these names in here. Hacktoberfest.
Yep. I did want to touch briefly about like how to kind of stay sane, right? From a contributor side, it's important to recognize the maintainer side, right? I'll stop sharing for this. That way we can get deep into this.
Okay.
So
I'll put on my therapy face.
Yeah. So very often the maintainers of open source projects are just you and me, right? Most are just people, right? Not companies, not foundations. That's where a large chunk of open source is. And for companies who sponsor open source programs, that's great. But again, most of it is through the goodwill of people who are just like, I have a good idea. I'd like to share it with you. The Python language was invented by Guido van Rossum 30 years ago, and he basically freely gave it away to everybody. And we all use it in some fashion every single day, whether you like it or not. Like something you're using is using Python, right?
Right.
And it's all just free. So thank you, right? Now, with that comes the inverse kind of behavior of thank you, but I want more, right? And I think the very important part there is, as a maintainer, you've often kind of done this out of the goodness of your heart as like, I needed to figure out a problem, scratch an itch. I didn't sign up to become a software supporter for your random requests. So I think remembering that the majority of maintainers are just folks with sometimes day jobs, other commitments, and while they love doing this, they're not here to serve you. They're here to serve the interest of the open source community. So they have to balance
package they're
that.
working on. This doesn't pay the bills. This is
very
a passion
rarely
project.
Yeah. The folks who get paid to work on a full-time open source are like the 1%ers in our industry, right?
Right.
Like, that's pretty cool. It's awesome. I hope they do very well, but it's not the common case. So when we were looking at, some of those repos before, those are often just folks, right? Sentry is a company, right? CPython has a foundation, but the core development team are all volunteers, right? Like most of them. And some might be paid by their employers to work on this, but they might not. They might be paid by their employers to do something else, and they do this as their side fun hustle, right? So when you're a contributor coming to a project, even if you're not contributing code, you want to write a GitHub issue or you want to report a bug, it's important to recognize that the other person on the other side of the equation is often looking to like get to the important stuff as quick as possible. So like one of those contributing guides said, please provide a reproducible snippet of something that will help them understand what it is you're talking about. Because if you're like, hey, my program doesn't work and that's it.
It didn't work.
Like,
no,
thanks.
You
sorry.
You fixie.
You fix it. Like, what does that even mean? Right. Like, so in times like those, I reflect a lot back to a minimal reproducible example notion. And this is something that Stack Overflow has kind of published on their site. They call it a reprex, might call it like that, but it's pretty much use as little code as possible, be complete, and make sure it's reproducible. So they go into detail of like what all these things are, right? Describe the problem. It doesn't work, isn't descriptive enough. Like, what does that mean, right? So this is just a really good resource that I'll reflect back to on like when I'm writing an issue for someone is, have I given them all the information that I can? So that way they don't have to ask another question. They understand from reading what I have written.
That is awesome. Reproducible example.
I have a pull request example that I did also about a decade ago. It's a 1-character change in the code. So files changed. There's I went into dark mode. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Yeah, my computer it figured it's dark outside, so it went to dark mode. 1-character change. Right. It was really, this is running some shell command, it's running some grep command and blah, blah, blah. But my commit, I wrote exactly in the commit message. Let me boost this size a little bit. I gave it a great title, which says what it does. It updates the Debian service check for multiple matches. And then I describe what it does. Apparently I can't click here without it collapsing. So I provide an example in the commit message. It's like, all right, well, this is what happens here. If I give this service and I do this thing, then if I modify it, I get the right answer, right? So there was no tests that needed to be updated at this time back in 2015 on this project. But it was literally a 1-character change And the conversation was the same thing that I put in the commit message. I added, I looked for any tests, couldn't find any. The author said, thanks, and merged it, which is perfect, and then released it. Like, that's the perfect interaction of, I did the thing, I told you why I did the thing, here's what it does, and it's literally one character. But I felt the need, because I was very brand new, this was my first contribution to this project, I felt the need to explain what I saw, why I saw it, because otherwise I'm just throwing a dollar sign at somebody, right? Like, I could have done this and said this, that's all I did, right? And they could have turned back and said, why? What is this for? But by spending that extra time in the description to say, this is what it does, this is why, the recipient says, got it, this is a good idea, let's go, right?
Looks good to me.
Yeah. The kind of last bit that I wanted to kind of really dig into is the staying sane aspect. Right. So it's very easy to kind of try and do everything all at once, and it's hard to, like, as an engineer, you see a problem and you see that you can fix it. You're like, all right, well, I'm going to fix all the things right now. And that can lead to, I've spent a whole lot of time fixing your broken project. I've submitted the code to you. How come you aren't accepting my code? Right. And sometimes as a maintainer, you get contributions and somebody says, somebody you have never met before, you've never seen them. There's some random person out there on the internet has submitted something to you and you don't know why, or it's too big. And it's like, I don't have time for this right now. It's not well understood. So very often they'll just defer it, right? Like, I don't owe you anything. I'm just not going to look at this right now. Sure. So from a staying sane perspective, I often like to start small, right? Create an issue that describes the problem very succinctly, very clearly what the problem is. If it's an obvious fix, like a typo, submit one typo fix. Don't reformat the entire code base to fix one typo, right? Like KISS, keep it small and simple.
Yep, makes sense.
So if you keep things small, then, on the one hand, that's more work because it's like, oh, I just have to tease out this one thing where I could do all these different things. But it builds some trust, right? The maintainers will see your name and say, that's Chris. He's really good at finding our typos or kind of missing formatting and fixing them. And we trust him now because he's done this 3 times and he's done it thoroughly. So, like, all right, that's how you get bigger and better. The first contribution I had to PyPI.org was a typo fix. That's what it was. I fixed a typo. And then I looked around and said, there's some other stuff I could fix here. The like setting up the development environment wasn't as smooth as I had hoped. So I could polish some of these rough edges or pull out some of the weeds and make that a little better. And, fast forward a year later and I've got, all sorts of reviews and big changes and like material behavioral changes on the data models in there. And like, it just builds up over time. And I think the important part is, like, keep it small, try a few things, right? Don't try and, fix the world all at once, because that's really hard.
Excellent advice in a lot of different areas, not even just software development. Yeah. Keep it small, keep it simple, start, use gain trust. This is human relationships 101.
I mean, ultimately, open source contribution is human relationships, right? Like, sure, it's all software, it's all computers, but like, I don't know you. Who are you? Who are you? Why are you sending me this? Oh, it's a typo? Yeah, okay, no problem.
I mean, if you put yourself in any one of those people's shoes, it's an unpaid person with a beef, another unpaid person who's trying to help fix a code base, and it's honestly astonishing that we have as much open source as we do, given that everybody has to have a day job and feed kids and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly.
I was having a conversation about it. I mean, Guido van Rossum and Linus Torvalds, just between those two humans, there has been so much free software that has spawned from the not the fallout, but the fruits of their labor have, that's the wrong word. The fruits of their labor have created so much additional spillage of all of this other creativity. It's really staggering. If Linus had said, no, I'm going to charge for the Linux kernel, or no, I want people to pay for Git, or it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, I mean,
Beep agrees.
You can go down a rabbit hole of open source. Oh, hello, cat. Of open source software licensing, and there are some kind of like hardliners who believe that all software should be open source and like free, which that's one position, right?
That's a take. Yeah,
that is a take. I think that I have done I've open sourced some things that, like, honestly, I'm not making money on this, right? I have a popular Python testing library called PyTestSocket, which helps prevent network calls during your tests, so that way you don't accidentally call some network service, a database, or a third-party API, and has the added benefit of making sure that your tests run that much faster because they're not running network calls. Could I charge for it? Maybe. Should I? Probably not. It's not that hard of a problem. And I've made just so many other folks' lives just a little bit easier. And guess what? I was only able to write it because everybody else out there had written other open source software. So like, I didn't come up with all of this on my own. I stand on the shoulders of giants.
I was just about to say that phrase.
As someone who is, I think, 6'7", I don't think you get to say that phrase.
Well, I could have. Nobody knows me on the internet.
I get to stand on your shoulders. Awesome. Metaphorically speaking. But
understood.
But
yeah, I have a bad back. I'm old. You can't stand on my shoulders. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I just want to like hammer home that notion of like, open source is approachable to everyone in every capacity. Like if you're a product manager and you have a bad product experience using some open source package platform, open an issue, say, here's what I had a problem with, show some screenshots, show some workflow. The recipients might say, oh, we didn't think people would use it that way, and go ahead and kind of address that. If you're
and you don't even really have to know Git to get involved in it. You can jump into a repo in GitHub and just edit it raw right there, and submit your changes straight without even doing commits or pulls.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh no, like anybody can do it, right? If you're a tester, or if you are a front end more focused person and you're scared about developing in back end, again, there's any which way. You can always look and see, oh, this is not as complicated as I initially thought, or the folks in this community are pretty welcoming. And one of the maintainers of PiPi had seen that I had contributed to one of the one-on-one pull requests, and then pointed me at another issue and said, hey, are you interested in tackling this one? So I think a good maintainer will identify key areas of interest by the contributor and point them in the right direction for another hit, right?
Right. And is that how you eventually then became a maintainer? Was all that built up goodwill, and they're like, "Hey, we got a sucker here. Let's drag them even further into down the rabbit hole."
A little bit. When they invited me into the maintainers group chat, all the one of the other folks was like, "All right, I guess we can all just quit and leave Mike here holding the bag, right?"
Peace.
Peace. But no, they're a really awesome group of folks, and I think for me, it was just like a little bit mind blowing that this one resource that powers a significant part of the internet's backbone by providing package, publishing and authorship for anybody out there. If you want to publish Python package, you can today if you want to. And then consumers of those packages to the point where, like, if we go down, the internet has a bad day. We hear about it all over Twitter. So we work a lot. And it's just the four of us core maintainers for this service and a bunch of extra contributors who are, again, contributing their time and efforts to help us on this journey to make things better.
Were someone nefariously inclined, they could say, yeah, that's a nice warehouse you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it.
I mean, yes, there would be a shame if something happened to it. So we work really hard to make sure it doesn't.
No, I'm saying you could say that to Cap One or Amazon or something else. Never mind.
Yes, one could do that. I don't think we're going to. That kind of defies the entire ethos of what we're trying to do.
Whatever. Fine. Look, I'm trying to make you money, Mike. I mean, thank you, Mr. Fiedler, for your valuable contributions to the OSS. All right, I'm going to cut that out in post. By the way. Cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, hopefully this gave, you and the listeners some kind of like more tangible ideas of how to get involved. I think there's one of the key themes is there's no right way or wrong way to do it. There's just the way with the project that you're engaging with. And, they're all going to be a little bit different. There's some commonalities, obviously. A lot of people do things a lot of the same way, but some don't, right? Like the PostgreSQL contribution process is not on GitHub at all, right? The GitHub repository is a mirror of their externally hosted code repository, and they take contributions through things that existed prior to Git, which is mailing list patches, right? So you make your code change, you format it as a patch, which basically that's what Git is doing under the hood. And you post your patch on the mailing list for discussion, approval, and a maintainer may commit that or not, but it's a different process. And I think learning each system that you want to get involved in, learning their process goes a long way to establish a kind of really cool knowledge of how software gets built on the internet.
Amazing. And that's experience and exposure and just inuring yourself to it. Yep. Nice. Well, Mike, that was amazing. Thank you very much for all of the advice and the links that I'm going to start chasing down. Be chasing down? What happened to my English? I've lost it. I got so excited. Any final parting thoughts? Any last acorns, nuggets?
Yeah, I think the number one thing that continues to remain with me is that, like, remember to be kind, because it's hard. Like, what we do is hard. Our jobs are hard. We're often, pressured for delivery, and just be kind. The people out there on the internet, they're just people like you and me, right? They've got their shtick, they've got their problems. Just remember that. Everybody
has a bad day every now and then.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking your valuable time away from the warehouse to chat with us newbies, and looking forward to the next conference that you and I attend, so we can squirrel away for an hour or two, and I can ask you dumb questions all over again.
Love it.
Wonderful.
You can ask me dumb questions whenever you want, and I will say I don't think there are dumb questions. I think there's just
I'm so good at it.
There's no dumb questions. There's just questions without
right?
context yet.
That's why I took that course, so I could start beefing up my foundation, so I can ask even better questions now. Yes. Wonderful, Mike. Thank you so much for coming on. You know what? I got so tied up, I forgot to check to see if there's any questions.
Oh.
I think. Nope, too late, already gone down the rabbit hole. Sanity is gone now. Right, Shala?
Okay.
And links, and everybody's doing great. And this was a fantastic talk.
Awesome.
Have a wonderful evening.
Be here for it.
And we will see you on the internet, in the warehouse, and at conferences.
Sounds great.
All right. Have a good night, y'all.
Good night.